Welcome to Conversations with Pastor Charlie, a series of candid, insightful discussions offering a godly perspective on current events, interviews with people from all walks of life, and other topics the Lord places on Pastor Charlie's heart. Now here's Pastor Charlie.
Well, tonight I want to resume our talk about something that some people might call political, but really it is a biblical principle, and it affects the church as well as the United States. So this is part 4 of United We Stand. Our starting point was and is Mark 3, verses 24 and 25. If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. You know, this applies to our nation, it applies to the church, and it applies to our families. 4 weeks ago, we identified the first problem that is dividing the church and therefore our country, and that is disunity. The disunity is what is compounding the second problem, which is a lack of holiness. Well, tonight we're going to talk about freedom from excellence. The right rules allow us to enjoy a much richer freedom, not limit our freedom. So let's try something. What are eyes for? Go ahead and holler out. What are eyes for? What are ears for? What's the nose for? How about feet, stomach, heart, brain? What are you for? This is not a trick question. Our purpose is to love, seek, know, glorify, and enjoy God forever. A free society allows us to love, seek, and enjoy God. It frees us to fulfill our other God-given purposes as free beings made in the image of God, to love our families and fellow human beings and exercise the virtues required to do that. Now, Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 through 40 says, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these 2 commandments." Love that is coerced is not love. To fully obey Jesus' commandments, then we must be free. The law is written on the heart, stone, and parchment. Deuteronomy 6:6 says, "And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to do these commands which I am giving you today." We enjoy a greater freedom when our society is based on the rules that allow us to become what we are meant to be. Many reject the idea of godly purpose, but because everyone has some grasp of universal moral truth, a free society is possible even among those who have different beliefs. Now also listen to me, the law of nature and nature's God. That's what we're going to talk about next. Our founders, following Christian tradition, referred to these unchanging moral truths as the natural law. That's why Thomas Jefferson appealed to the laws of nature and nature's God in the Declaration of Independence. He was talking about moral principles that everyone knows or ought to know. Natural law stands above even the law of the land. Now, as Reverend Samuel West told the Massachusetts legislature in 1776 in a sermon encouraging the American Revolution, he said, quote, "The most perfect freedom consists in obeying the dictates of right reason and submitting to natural law," unquote. We all know that it's wrong to murder. We know that parents should care for their children. Husbands should care for and love their wives. We can see that children generally prosper best with a mother and a father in the home. That male and female were made for each other. Sex outside of marriage causes problems. In these and thousands of other ways, we learn the basic form of natural law. Now, let me give you a couple of scriptures, a couple more. Romans 1:20. It says, "For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God." Now in Romans 2, verses 14 and 15, it says, "Even Gentiles who do not have God's written law show that they know his law when they instinctively obey it, even without having heard it. They demonstrate that God's law is written in their hearts. For their own conscience and thoughts either accuse them or tell them they are doing right." Now we're going to talk about God's natural and divine laws are written on everyone's heart. So let's look back at Romans 1 and see the consequences of sin. Romans 1:21 through 23 says, "Yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. As a result, their minds become dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they instead become utter fools. And instead of worshiping the glorious, ever-living God, they worshiped idols made to look like mere people and birds and animals and reptiles." So now let's talk about the consequences that sin brings. It said that they would not worship God. They wouldn't be thankful. These are consequences of sin. They wouldn't be thankful, especially to God. They think God's ways are foolish. They become dark in their mind and therefore are confused. They think they are wise, but truly are fools. They will worship things instead of God. Now let's go on. Verses 24 and 25 says, "So God abandoned them to do whatever shameful things their hearts desired. As a result, they did vile and degrading things with each other's bodies. They traded the truth about God for a lie. So they worshiped and served the things God created instead of the Creator himself, who is worthy of eternal praise." Amen. You see, the next consequence is a big one. God abandons them to their foolish thinking. They now naturally believe lies instead of God. But there's more. Verses 26 and 27 says, "That is why God abandoned them to their shameful desires. Even the women turned against the natural way to have sex and instead indulged in sex with each other. And the men, instead of having natural sexual relations with women, burned with lust for each other. Men did shameful things with other men. And as a result of this sin, they suffered within themselves the penalty they deserved. Now, this is an area many will say that I'm getting political again, but I believe it is plain. God allows them to give into shameful desires. These women, they leave the natural desires and now desires relation with women. Why do we have men and women? To procreate. Yes. Two women can't do that. Two men can't do that. So likewise, men leave the natural, God-ordained relationship with women for shameful desires for other men. Now we all devise clever ways to deny what we know of the natural law. Rather than defending murder by name, human beings often try to define certain groups of people out of membership in the human race. For example, Nazis and the Jews, whites and the blacks. Unborn babies are just a fetus. Abortion isn't murder, rather reproductive rights or a choice. Our founders were so confident in the truth of natural law that Thomas Jefferson claimed in the Declaration of Independence that they were self-evident. He penned, let me quote it to you. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Most of us learned that in school. I pray that our kids are still learning it. We can protect life and liberty. And most people understand this. However, the pursuit of happiness is often misunderstood. Most people think that we're guaranteed happiness. No, we're not guaranteed happiness, but the pursuit of happiness. Now, where Paul talks about the law written on our hearts, he also explains that government's authority comes from God. Romans 13, verses 1 through 6, let me quote it to you. Everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. For the authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but those who are doing wrong. Would you like to live without fear of the authorities? Do what is right, and they will honor you. The authorities are God's servants, sent for your good. But if you are doing wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. So you must submit to them, not only to avoid punishment, to also to keep a clear conscience. Pay your taxes too, for these same reasons. For government workers need to be paid. They are serving God in what they do. You know, Paul wrote this when Rome was the government, and believe me, it was a very bad government. Most countries' laws are subject to a person, king, dictator. But our laws, they are based on God. In the United States, all government officials and military personnel, as well as new citizens, pledge an oath not to a king or tribe, but to the Constitution. Our founding fathers saw a paradox. Sin is the main reason we need government, and also the main reason to limit government. The primary goal of our laws is to legislate our deepest shared moral judgments. The problem arises when the people don't have the right foundation to base their morals on. So let me ask you some more questions. Did the abolishing of slavery and the passage of civil rights laws affect people's attitudes? Did it affect their attitudes about slavery and race? Did the passing or repealing of Roe v. Wade influence people's views on abortion? When same-sex marriage was made the law of the land, do you think it affected the sexual attitudes and actions of school children? If suicide for terminally ill becomes widely accepted, do you think this will affect how we view the sick and elderly? If the sale of marijuana is legalized, will that influence views on the morality of smoking pot? Let me give you the answers. Yes, 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 and yes. The American founders knew that a sound government needed to be virtuous citizens. George Washington insisted that we distinguish the spirit of liberty from that of decadence, cherishing the first, avoiding the last. Samuel Adams said, "Neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt." To restore freedom, we must restore respect for the rule of law, God's law. Now that should start with us, the church. If those submitted to the Holy Spirit won't do it, how can we expect it from anyone else? Now, because the United States of America is getting ready to celebrate our 250th anniversary, I have been going over foundational principles. And if the Lord allows, next week, we'll start going over some of the issues. Thanks.
Jesus is coming soon. Are you ready to meet him face to face? Are your family and friends ready to meet him face to face? Please be ready. Then help others get ready. God bless.